let's talk about this loss, the most recent one. What's the first thing that stands out to you about it? Because I have strong opinions. Unlike
Yeah, I mean, first, as a fan, it was rough to watch. I mean, losing to Dallas, I wasn't there for or alive for the Dallas rivalry, but I have Cowboy hate ingrained in my blood. So losing to Dallas is like losing to Seattle. I wouldn't mind, like, this season's been rough. I understand what's happened. I understand what the coaches and players have had to go through with the injuries and with the relocation and all of that. But man, it would have been nice to beat Dallas. Like, as a fan, that would have really helped. My thoughts on the game was it's been the same kind of game we've seen. The Niners have had a solid game plan. They've been able to execute at times. They haven't been able to execute at times. And that's what happens when you're playing like 16 backup players. That's just what happens. Well, yeah, but that's just what happens when you're playing backup players. I've seen a lot of special team scrutiny on the timeline, on Twitter, and all of that. And I do want to say something about the special teams, just a food for thought. So the Niners special teamers, their main special teamers, the Tarvarius Moores, those kinds of guys are now playing defense, which means they're not playing special teams. And that's why the Niners special teams has been tending to struggle, because all the guys they sign, they basically just throw on special teams. And people act like special teams is simple, but there's a reason the New England Patriots have invested in Matthew Slater for years. There is a reason Brad Seeley, when he was here, had Bubba Ventrone to run down the field and Blake Costanzo, and they invested in those guys because special teams takes coaching, it takes synchronization, it takes work, and the Niners special teams doesn't have that practice. So I did want to mention that. But overall, it was just kind of a rough game. Nick Mullins kind of did. Go ahead.
Okay, no, keep going. You can keep going. I'm just saying that's like the nicest thing you could say about that game. Rough.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about
embarrassing, Vish. Don't you think?
Right.
I mean, look, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just taking it a step farther because you're a nice guy and I'm a jerk.
Sure.
So what I'm saying is, yeah, man, it stinks to lose to Dallas, but they beat themselves. They didn't lose to Dallas. They fumbled the first punt. They fumbled the second, third down. Like, just go home, man. Just go home.
It's tough. And, this is why I was a little reluctant to really credit Nick Mullins after the Rams game, because he has a tendency and a propensity to turn the ball over. And where I question him long-term as a starter is when the games are tight and the game situation needs Nick Mullins to make a play, he often makes a mistake. And that's why when they're in these close games, they're losing with Nick Mullins.
Because he's a backup. Right.
Yep. And he's ultimately a backup player. We could sit here and nitpick every single thing with him, but to me, he's kind of a footnote, just like he's a footnote when they win with him, because he's a $750K backup that shouldn't be playing 7 games. So I wouldn't really be crediting him when they win. And when they lose, it's like, what do you expect from him? You got to start picking at, well, what were the other guys doing? Because those are the guys that are going to be the long-term future of the 49ers. Nick Mullins isn't. So that's where I stand with that. Okay. Ultimately, I did CJ, we know what CJ is, but he did have the one sweet throw to Jet against the blitz. I like that, the little sidearm flick. That was a little swaggy, and I didn't know he could throw that far. He launched that.
He can throw far.
He launched it. So that was
he's like an outfielder in baseball. He doesn't necessarily throw like 90 miles an hour, but he throws a lot of long tasks. He can throw long. Yep.
Right. So, yeah, and I think the number one thing that we're learning is, obviously, we're going to talk about the quarterbacks. The Niners' entire offseason is going to be focused around the quarterbacks because nobody knows, right? Kyle Shanahan's this enigma with what he wants in a quarterback because we've never actually seen him get the opportunity to pick multiple different guys, and we can then kind of pencil in Kyle Shanahan looks for these things with his quarterbacks because we haven't seen it. And so that's going to be the conversation. The one thing we did learn is that I don't think there is a possibility of where you can say, hey, draft a guy and Nick Mullins.
Hold on. Let's not go to the quarterback discussion yet. Let me say one thing about this loss before we move on.
Sure.
Let me say something about this loss. You're very measured and even-handed, but what I got to say about this loss is it's embarrassing because they beat themselves. It's one thing if you go to Dallas and you lose because the other team is just outplays you. But for like a bunch of weeks in a row, that the Niners haven't even gotten to that level. They beat themselves. And it's not just Nick Mullins turned the ball over. It's Richie James Jr. It's Mike McGlinchey getting beat by DeMarcus Lawrence. It's everyone. And it's like It's okay that you lose games, and it's okay that you have a ton of excuses. 28 players on IR, that's fine. But to beat yourselves every week and to have it be a group effort is a bad sign. And I always come back to the coach with that, but we're going to talk about Kyle and what we feel about him later. But that's what I'm saying is this is, again, below the standard, even with injuries. You can't beat yourself every week.
Sure. The two things for me I would say with that is what I was trying to say with Mullins. It's the situation where I don't think there's a possibility where I think after the Giants game, we would have said, well, if they're going to move off of Jimmy, right, Jimmy's hurt, then maybe Nick can start 3 games and they can draft a guy and do it that way. I don't think that's a possibility now. You can't start Nick Mullins. It's getting to the point where you're coaching up these games and you're making mistakes as a team around him, which you can't do, and he's making mistakes, which he's going to do. So it's just not going to work that way. And the other thing I will say is that, and I think this is kind of the biggest point I took away from the game, is there's a guy who doesn't get a lot of credit when he does play well, and there's a guy who takes a lot of slander when he plays well. And he got hurt yesterday, and I thought his impact was felt with the defense, and that's Jimmy Ward. And Jimmy Ward is a Pro Bowl level safety. I want to just keep reiterating it because I feel like he's the kind of guy that not many fans, when he plays well, it's not like people are going crazy. He's not marketable. He's just quiet, unassuming, does his job. They really missed him yesterday. He covers a lot of weaknesses on this defense.
And he sells out. He threw his body around in a game that ultimately didn't matter and got knocked out. Richard Sherman was getting out of the way of tackles. Ultimate respect for Jimmy Ward.
Right. And the thing is, we've talked about, right, ad nauseum, well, can they play man coverage? Can they play zone coverage? Jimmy Ward is kind of what allows them to be multiple in coverage because they can put Jimmy Ward on a bunch of different players in a bunch of different spots and say, just guard that guy in man and we'll play zone or we'll play man now and we'll play 2-man and stuff like that. And they can do those things because he's that versatile. If you saw Saleh blitz the first couple times they had Moore and Harris, and I think he blitzed because he can no longer be multiple by rushing 4. He's got to play cover 3 or cover 4 with those 2 guys at safety. So he tried to cover that by blitzing.
Yeah. Also, the thing with Jimmy, I feel like this is the double-edged sword with Jimmy. Like, to me, he's at his best at strong safety around the action, around tight ends and stuff. But he still is built like a corner, and he broke. Now, I'm not saying that I just felt like it was inevitable. You play him 16 games at strong safety, something bad's going to happen because he plays like a linebacker and is built like a corner, and that just means bad things are going to happen. So I feel like the Niners have been like trying to protect him from himself his whole career. And this second half of the season, they're like, all right, man, we need you, dude. Go play strong safety. We need you. And he gave him everything. So I actually, Jimmy Ward, salute.
I actually disagree with that real quick. I do think they've put him in the box a lot more, but I think the thing they've been able to get away with is that both him and Tart can rotate and play both free safety and both strong safety proficiently. Right. With Moore, they're scared to have him at the box, especially when you're playing offenses that have window dressing because he's not the best with his eyes and just executing, hey, what's my job on this play? Can I do this job? He's young. He's inexperienced. He had a couple nice plays yesterday, so that's nice. But, yeah, I think – I just wanted to point that out because not many people, I feel like, give Jimmy Ward the credit where credit is due, and I just wanted
he went out on his sword this season, unlike 25, 69. Hey, salute Jimmy Ward, no question. And also Tavarius Moore made a nice play in the fourth quarter. He did not quit. Kendrick Bourne, beautiful catch with the Hail Mary. A lot of Niners are still fighting, and that's my last thought. When Kendrick Bourne caught that Hail Mary when the game was over, I was like, okay, I will respect you for the rest of your career. You did that. You could have been like, game's over, man. What,
right.
Salute Kendrick Bourne.